Okay, everyone, good evening. I think we should get started.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everyone doing? Great.
Good. Can't complain. How are you?
I'm doing splendid.
Awesome.
All right. So last time we met, we talked about a quick review of modules 1 and 2. And we began going into we went over the Basel Core, 3 pillars, and then we started to talk about some of the credit risk considerations, the application and behavioral scorecards. Now let's talk about corporate governance, right? So corporate governance means what to you?
I didn't hear the question. What you said?
I said corporate governance, what does it mean to you?
I feel, Mr. Williams, that it sets the tone for any institution, basically the head of an organization.
Okay. Set the tone, great.
Okay. Corporate governance is the guidelines and stipulations that are set in place by the institution that puts those rules in place in which financial companies are run or governed by, let's say that. So that's what I got from that.
Thank you for that wonderful reference. Would you care to provide us with your site sources?
Oh, I just did my corporate governance class last year. So that's why I remember everything.
Ah, there you go.
Yes.
No, it was a very good overview. Very good. Okay, Anika, Teresa.
Good evening. I just joined. Please fill me in on what's being discussed.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll send you the minutes. And we'll go from there.
I'll go since Lene just joined. I think for me, corporate governance, similar to what was said, it would be those policies and procedures or plans that are board approved, that sets the tone for the company in terms of the direction, their expectation, what is tolerable and what is intolerable, and how the company itself should function ideally.
There you got it, Nico. What is corporate governance? Thanks for joining us, everyone. So let's continue. What are your thoughts, Nico? Did we get disconnected?
No, I'm here. When you said you'll send me the minutes, you were, okay, sorry. I guess I'm a little bit confused. That was just a general questioning. I'm not supposed to be reading anything.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
That was just a general question.
Okay, so in my opinion, corporate governance, and I've heard it from everyone so far, is I guess it's a compilation of the board of directors setting the tone at the top of an organization, and then executive management carrying that out and ensuring that the necessary, I guess, mitigants are in place to ensure that the risk appetite of the organization is, I guess, at a stable level and not being exceeded. Also ensuring that policies and procedures are updated and reviewed and approved by the board.
Okay, So we have a resounding tone at the top: resiliency, buoyancy, stabilization, policies and procedures, and this is all great from a 101 perspective. Let's level it up, right? So in your view, what would be the risk manager's posture when you think about corporate governance? Their role, what would be the risk manager's posture? I'll ask again. When we think about the function and responsibility enshrined within corporate governance. While everyone is
okay.
searching, go ahead, Jacob B.
Oh, sorry, I under my brother's ID.
That's fine.
But-
You're Jacob B for the night.
But tonight, just for tonight, I would classify a risk officer or chief risk officer as the executioner, right? So normally there are regulations in place.
Janelle.
Hi,
Sorry,
can you
not
hear
to
me?
cut you off, Janelle. Janelle, when you said, so you said you saw the risk manager as the executioner?
Yeah.
Okay, go, continue.
Yes. So what happens is we have certain guidelines to follow. Those guidelines are then presented to a team of people. Those team of people then make decisions for the company on which, needs to be done. The risk officer, in my opinion, he then makes sure that, okay, these are functions that we can complete and how they are completed. So in my opinion, I feel like he or she normally execute what's the board and regulations have already put in place, but to a more in-depth standard, in my opinion. So that's what I got from that.
That works. I can leverage with that.
Okay.
So we have the corporate governance, which embodies the board of directors, and they are going back. Remember now, we are talking about CIRM. So we can bring up business concepts. However, the language and the integration is going to be able to, we want to bring through the risk management posture. So Basel 1, Pillar 1, capital strategy, operational risk, market risk, credit risk. So you have the board that establishes the strategy. These are the business objectives. We know about the mission and the vision. The risk manager would help to align that strategy to make it smart. So human resources, we talk about specific, realistic, measurable, etc., right? Achievable, realistic, measurable, time bomb, right? Smart. And the risk manager would also demonstrate value at risk factors. So you will have a set of KPIs or key performance indicators that should clearly align with each business objective. Because the corporate governance wants to, through its board, in consultation with its senior management, wants to generate credit sales. And the risk manager will say, I need you to take into account your ceiling of credit growth by carving out some restricted capital in the context of regulatory guidelines, a percentage of risk-rated assets by portfolio. That's one. Another factor would be, I need you to think about how you're going to allocate your risk by customer segmentation. Yes, you want to generate a certain amount of income by your customer portfolio, but let's further segment that. And that segmentation can be by different operable variables, that is high risk, medium risk, low risk. So that's standard or basic rails of assessment. But then it goes further. It goes into the behavioral dynamics of the relationship. It goes into the complexity of the products and services. So that's why we started talking about the pillars. And then we went into one core factor within financial services, which is relatable for us, is our credit delivery, our credit product and services in the Bahamas, because you have credit by way of foreign direct investment, you have credit by way of supporting capital investment by the government, foreign direct investment, of course, by the international organizations, individuals coming into the Bahamas to really stimulate that growth, private sector credit with supports, as you know, again, that intertwining running of our country. And then, of course, we all know about the consumer credit and then more complex mortgages, and then it goes along the way. We have borrowing as the interwoven fabric from our overall society. Now we have the credit bureau to really try to create some type of behavioral smoothing within our region, firstly, and then at the same time stimulate us to evolve into the various disciplines that support key metrics, assessments, and overall effective decision making. So when you think about corporate governance, how do we govern the strategic objectives while executing in the normal course of business? So what are we saying? Risk managers is advisory. Risk management is a consultative body that has to be on the cutting edge. I talked about reading, making yourself more aware, immersing yourself in every relatable and suitable discipline, of course, tailored to your organization's needs and key objectives. That way you can support timeliness and effectiveness and in fact the overall impact. So I like that position when we talk about corporate governance, when we talk about the risk manager. Let's go into it some more. So last week we brought up the quadrant, and I want to pull it up now. Before we continue, any questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Just wanted to confirm, so you were, because I was late, you were just explaining or trying to confirm the role of the risk manager, correct? That was the objective?
Okay. One second. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Well, we were really talking about, yes, the role, but really just one element of it. So we're going to break it down into business segments shortly. And the objective of this approach, again, we were transitioning from module 1 to module 2, now coming into module 3. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we have our quadrant in front of us. Now, can everybody see my arrow or my cursor? Yes?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Or I can.
So we talked about some of the core elements relative to risk management, and the fundamental steps are within this circumference, if we were to use this, right? This is a good slide for you to sort of just mark, because and make notes on this slide if you have it printed out. You're going to build a lot of module 3, in fact, even 1 and 2 on this very same slide. So let's go through it. Your steps, whether you want to start here or here, you want to be able to identify your risk. You want to be able to, and again, we're going through the cycle, the risk management cycle. Identification, measurement, assessment, controls, or any mitigation factor, and then ongoing effectiveness. So whether you start here, here, or here, you want to think about those 5 core process flows, right? Now, let's talk about what's happening in the media today. I would have asked everyone to do some reading, do a little research. Did anything stand out to you from a risk management context? Anything across any industry, whether it's a institutional product, consumer product, no matter what it is. And I'd like for you to give an example. So I see everybody likes me to pick on that. Let's see. All right. Let's start with let's go with our administration expert, Ms. Lanika Johnson.
Okay, so in all honesty, I did not actively look at the news for related cases, but something dropped in my lap, I guess yesterday, where I saw that class action lawsuit was being pursued against Old Navy. To be honest, this may even be spam in my email, but you know, we could talk about it. And the claim was that Old Navy had done some false advertising. Let's see what else. Okay, so engaged in deceptive advertising by advertising purportedly improper reference prices on merchandise. Gap denies wrongdoing, Old Navy Gap, same company, and liability, and both sides disagree on how much, if anything, the class could have recorded after trial. No court has decided which side is right, but both sides agreed to provide benefits to Old Navy and Old Navy outlet customers and resolve the case. So this seems to me like I guess mismanagement of, well, this is a reputational risk, one.
Okay.
And also operational risk.
Okay.
Because the prices that were being advertised on the merchandise were, I guess, incorrect. And so some way, somehow, someone perhaps did not execute their job correctly by pricing the items correctly, which brought this class action suit against Old Navy. So yeah, something operationally, I guess, dysfunctioned.
No, that's fine. That works. So we've identified the problem. We have a pricing risk situation that clearly resulted in operational risk exposure, reputational risk exposure, now certainly litigation. So as the risk manager, and I'd like for everyone to chime in, as the risk manager, what are some of the responses or remediation efforts, mitigating controls that we can put in place? So let's firstly remediate this issue, right? And then let's put in some controls to mitigate the risk of reoccurrence. Starting with Ebony. So Ebony, we have this issue with Old Navy. We love to travel, we go in the store, and let's look at this at an institutional level. I mean, volume sales, I need to buy cases and cases of a particular item. The price has been either inflated or not properly reflected. And so naturally, as a business owner or representative of the business, that impacts your bottom line. Corporate governance may have to get involved, whether we want to accept the additional exposure for the decision making. But you now obviously raise the complaint. What do we expect from the risk manager at the institution at Old Navy? What do you expect from them? Naturally, we're going to hear the customer complaint. That's one element of it. You may not necessarily want to accept the dollar value increase in the price, depending on your level of elasticity with your market need for the item or service. You may or may not accept it. But at the end of the day, what do we expect that risk management how they would respond going forward to remain buoyant coming out of something that could materially impact the soundness of their operations?
Okay, Ms. Williams, so I would say from the risk management standpoint, we may then have to go and look back at the framework of the organization, look at what controls were in place, may have to go back and actually revamp the framework to plan more efficiently, put better controls in place to prevent something like this happening again.
Okay, that's very helpful. Chanel, what do you think? Teresa?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I sort of agree with Ebony. I think there needs to be, as a risk manager, or the risk manager should make some type of assessment of the control failures, an assessment of the adequacy of whatever controls that they have in place and where they need to be strengthened, and then the likely impact to the business, and how do you manage the risk going forward. That's my 101 answer.
Okay. Now the theme for the night is level up. So yes, you definitely want to have an assessment done. You want to understand what were the gaps. So the gap analysis to appreciate where there could have been some type of deficiency in the operations. It may be a people risk factor. It could have been a policy adjustment. It could have certainly been exogenous risk by inflationary changes through pricing at the Federal Reserve. They need to reflect a certain level of price for the sustainability of their operations. So risk is never truly right or wrong. It has more to do with how we measure the uncertainty. We know that the first thing, we need to respond to the incident. So that's one aspect of it. And we got that part. That's the 101. The level up is I need to ensure that I put in place or incorporate buoyancy factors that take into consideration my success variables, so my KPIs, customer satisfaction, effectiveness process flow, system integration, price adjustment changes. And even if there are price adjustment changes, what are my customer notification strategies, right? If there are even, because of course, this has an impact to the financial statements from your EPS context, right? So your overall scale to market is a concern. We may have some cross-border implications. Persons on the investor side may now have lost the material value, whether it's an unrealized gain or realized gain. No one's going to complain if there's a true realized gain, but if there's unrealized losses, right, because of price changes, we now may be sanctioned by the Securities Commission or any of the regulatory bodies. And so we have to take into account what necessary practical structural or architectural design implications for the operations. So it goes a little further. So what does this mean? After we really calibrate this assessment and true vulnerability or penetration into perhaps maybe some of the systemic or unsystemic risk factors, we need to have this discussion with the board. What is the true value add and sustainability of maintaining this particular product or service within the operation? I may need to stress test or reverse stress test the markets in which we serve. Does it work? Does this particular product and service work well in this jurisdiction? Does it work well in another, right? What are my success factors? So this is now should drive or be the catalyst to consider what products work and why. If we think about Apple, we think about the Samsungs, if we think about the Microsoft, all of these organizations did one thing that made them a success. They streamlined their products and services. They understood the markets in which they were serving. They understood scale in terms of supply chain, in terms of cross-border considerations, value risk, people risk, systems, their whole delivery focus. They looked at their pillars, we talked about it, operational, market, credit within the context of capital. And they said, we're going to stream, instead of 10 things, we're going to focus on 2 or 3 things, and we're going to do it well. So right now, when you think about some of those companies like Apple, you really think about the suite of the iPhone, the Mac, the tablet, and they may have 1 or 2 other peripheral products, but it's their core, right? Same thing as Samsung. No one thinks about really the Samsung tablet or even the television. That's a highly competitive market with a homogeneous type of level of return, right? Because when you look at the yield curve, the linear output and even the projections on return from the customer or even from the return on sales, it's just been moderately flat. And that has to do with other peripheral factors. But at the end of the day, it's about, I now make an assessment as a risk manager. I take this information and I go into the future. How do I measure the uncertainty? Where do I want to go? So risk management It's just that there is continuous 360 feedback with those who are charged at the corporate governance level, those who are charged with accountability across the organization to keep strategy remaining dynamic, because it should never be fixed. If your strategy remains fixed, you will die a slow death, right? And even in this, we were able to see the cycles: identification, assessment, measuring, establish any type of mitigating factors, remediate the issue, put in place the controls, and now effectiveness. What is effectiveness, right? When we think about effectiveness, we think about our KPIs and how we remain dynamic. How do we remain robust, resilient, profitable, and success driven? So effectiveness is that constant engagement with all of the stakeholders from within the organization to even outside, right? The investors, of course, the production line, any element that helps in the overall delivery, that helps in the overall market value of your operations, they go into effectiveness. And we need to be able to adjust our assessment methodologies, right? And we'll go into some of those assessment methodologies later. So when we look at the quadrant, right, the upper left part of the quadrant really gets into that. You want to align the interests. We talked about corporate governance, the inherent business risk. We looked at reputation. This is what is core. This is where, of course, we talk about goodwill in the financial services sector. We know that it's a true sort of intangible factor to determine your market value and understand how you truly place at a competitive level. So reputation is something that is a critical component, right? Even in the design of your strategy, right? When we look at, say, for example, the stock market, or within the context of our business, right? You look at volume trading, right? What type of consumer level or investor level confidence does the market have for your operation, for your product and service delivery? What are some of the factors when we think about reputation, when we think about market value, right? What are some of the factors that could cause volatility within the market value when we really look at an exchange? So let's see. Let's go with Teresa. What do you think, Teresa? Ebony, save Teresa.
Sorry, Mr. Williams, if you don't mind, can you repeat it, please?
Sure. What are some factors that we believe can cause an adjustment or volatility in the investor confidence when we think about an exchange, the stock exchange or the financial exchange, or someone wanting to either purchase stock within the context of a company or sell their stock?
I would definitely say reputation is a major factor.
Okay.
I would say there their financial management.
Yes. So when you think about financial management, when we look at this from the posture of the risk manager, what do we think the risk manager considers? So you're on the right track, financial management.
Right. I would say how I guess the stability of the finances.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at their capital, taking into consideration their liquidity.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm on the right track, if that's what
You're
you're looking
absolutely on the
for.
right track. You're absolutely on the right track. And I know Teresa is so ready right now to save you
Yes,
and continue with the discussion.
I agree, Teresa.
Let's go with Lanika. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you there, Lanika? Okay. Okay. Great. I see everyone wants to have a strategy of remaining silent. So let's talk about it. Ebony, you were on the right track. The financial outlook, and the outlook is about the projections. It's about the analytics, year over year, trending. What type of confidence do I have in this organization? I'm looking at the financial statements. I'm reading the perspective, the overview from the president, the overview from the chief operating officer, from the chairman of the board. They are giving me some appreciation as to their strategy, what has been the engagement at the board, right? They've given me the results. So I've gotten their financial results. And the results may not have necessarily aligned with expectations because adjustments can happen throughout the year. There can be some negative impacts that could cause unfavorable variances in financial output. But the company remains sound. I'm able to understand the quality of the people, the quality of the processes, the quality of their systems, the quality of their people. When I look at the average rate of turnover from human resources, when I looked at how they navigated COVID-19, what has been their response as a corporate service from their corporate citizenry, right? When I look at the structure of their overall group level, right? Have they expounded? Have they decided to remain linear? Did they become more leaner in their overall strategy? We talked earlier about Apple, Samsung. They went from 10 plus products to focus on maybe 3 or 4. So it's leaning up the operations. So now I can see, guess what? Risk management is engaged, not necessarily that there's a risk manager. They are thinking critically about how they performed, and they've measured uncertainty in their forward-looking approaches, right? Any questions so far? Anyone?
Hi, I did hear you call me, but I was away from my computer. I So I just wanted to confirm that you are basically explaining, I guess, how the risk manager would look at a company's finances to project the outlook or make projections on what they should do to mitigate risks.
Yes, to some extent. What we're talking about is we're talking about corporate evaluation, the elements from a risk management posture that support the investor confidence or stakeholder confidence within an entity, and how you, as a nurturing risk manager, should take financial statements or overall financial information to support your role as a risk manager or the risk management posture through critical thinking. So this is just one element of it.
Okay, understood.
Because the question was, if we were to think about a stock exchange, what would be some of the factors that would impact volatility, whether it is favorable or unfavorable from the investor or potential or prospective investor slash customer, right? So I see Shirella put inside the chat political changes. You care to explain a little further? What did you mean by that? Were you expounding on what we were saying?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm on the right track, but usually too, when there's a change of government, investors' confidence can shift. Like, for instance, a lot of people who weren't, who are anti-Trump may have more confidence in the markets as opposed to those, the Democrats. Other factors can be environmental. Yeah, no, not right.
No, definitely. Especially when we think about our market, when we think about our environment is heavily influenced by decision made by the government. So definitely political changes have an impact, right? So you're spot on. Any questions from anyone else? Okay, so when we go into the other quadrants, right? So we have core business risk, investment risk, ops risk, legal and compliance risk. We dive a little deeper. We started talking about market value, liquidity considerations, ultimately leverage, diversification, model failure. These all come into that investment risk context, right? So firstly, what are some types of investment risk that an institution could face in the normal course of business?
I could jump in. I would say a risk is that the product that they're selling doesn't like flop to consumers.
Okay.
That's a risk, I think.
So the risk that the product wouldn't sell?
Yeah, like consumers wouldn't. I think I'm being a bit small. I'm not really thinking of like stocks and stuff like that. But even I feel like that does kind of still play with it, because if Apple was to like the products start blowing up, I'm sure everybody's gonna pull their investment. You know, like that. Like if the product that they're selling isn't good.
Okay. So you have a failure in your product and service from a customer satisfaction standpoint,
Right.
which then drives reputational risk, operational risk. You get some valuation factors in there. So yeah, definitely customer satisfaction with your product, right? So you're absolutely right. Any other risk factors from let's keep in mind a risk manager's posture, right? Investment risk. We are risk managers. And we want to think, let's go a notch above, a little notch above, when we're thinking about investment risk. What are some core examples of investment risk factors or investment risk when we think about those typologies?
I think a core factor of investment risk can be competition.
Okay, good.
And I would say investor risk. I would say liquidity risk, credit risk. Let's say you do like import and export, then you may have to look at the risk of like sanctions and not being able to move your products. Investor risk. Maybe concentration risk.
Okay.
What else?
Can I jump in there? Performance. Is performance like a risk?
Sorry.
Like the overall company's performance over the years.
Okay. So are we asking questions or are we giving examples?
Well, I was asking a question because she said something. So I think it got kind of blurred up.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That happens. Okay. So there's some standard risk that from an investment perspective that we should all think about as financial professionals, right? Of course, the slides go into that. You have, go ahead.
I have a question. So like, for example, with the pandemic and with the CDC saying that travelers should avoid cruise ships, would that, if as a risk manager, would that be like an industry risk that you would have to manage, or what would you characterize that risk as?
Absolutely. That's where we need to go. That's where we need to go. So you have risk to your industry. You have risk to your industry. From foreign direct investment not being able to transition to your country because of the disruption. So there's a risk of non-conformance by individuals and companies to adhere to health and safety protocols. Let's go a little further. We have the risk of the supply chain for the PPEs. We have the net import-export risk of getting vaccinations in, even though we would like a larger representative of the population being vaccinated and boosted. We have to manage the risk of maintaining economic operations while at the same time navigating COVID-19 and its potential exposure for our health, right? Then you have the conflict risk, which is how do I manage the priority of maintaining in political office while ensuring safety and soundness of the country's operations, as well as people confidence or citizenry confidence, right? The risk manager has to think about what is the strategy, strategic risk. Risk is not about, I want the risk to be low. It's about ensuring that the risk is manageable within the context of your tolerances. We laid out several examples and within the hypothetical that went in a good direction. And when you measure the uncertainty or the probability and likelihood of an exposure, so that's risk propinquity, then it goes into the risk reward dynamics. So we hear about it, but the risk reward dynamics is really about how do I align my tolerance with my expected outcome. An expected outcome has a value at risk factor of what is uncertain. So there's even a greater level of uncertainty within uncertainty because it's a forward-looking projection, right? The risk manager has to think about the constitutive instruments. Is it going to be of legal constructs? Is it going to be of moral constructs? Is it going to be based on my religious constructs? Am I going to take any decision making, whether it is political, business driven, familial? These, you have to align with the appetite, the tolerances. And that's the core of the risk. And then you operate your risk model, your risk cycle: identification, assessment, measurement, remediation, establish controls, and then you go into effectiveness, right? If we look at financial statements, we know what the rails of key inherent risk are. You have pricing risk, you have interest rate risk, and these slides go into that, right? Credit risk, we started talking about that. But when you align with the discipline and different factors that can happen, right now, there should be a dynamic view of your risk complexities. So you have layer one risk, standard risk impacting the operations that should be managed by the risk owners. And we talked about it, first level of defense or business line, right? And they help to drive risk. They help to drive risk either by their self-assessment or by assessment through consultation with risk managers and or the board or those charged with a degree of executive or senior management posture. Then you go into your leveraging component. Your leveraging component is, how do I create a degree of securitization to mitigate exposure should it happen. So we think about it quantitatively. I will lend credit to a customer and request that they have collateral. Great. What is that collateral? What is that leverage? That leverage is my risk transfer component. So the risk transfer component, the underlying asset is that collateral, and that collateral, property. We haven't gone into commodities in this market yet, but there are different forms of collateral, guarantees, leverage loans, this type of thing. But when you go into level 2 risk management, it is, what are the covenants? What is the soundness of the covenants that constitutes conformity or assurance with the ability to call on your risk transfer? Again, your constitutive constructs. What is my loan covenant? Does it speak to that? Do I need to have the engagement of legal counsel or some judicial element to have an irrevocable arrangement so that I would be able to draw on or have a legal right of set off on the collateral, right? Let's take it further. Does it go cross-border? Does it go into varying levels of complexity if it's an institutionally owned collateral? Do I need to have the rights of transfer established, right? So this is where your leverage comes in. Your liquidity is not just about dollar value liquidity. Your liquidity has a lot to do with the ability to have velocity. Liquidity should be considered in the context of being able to be agile. So I have a degree of risk concentration. Am I liquid? Am I agile to this risk? Will my investments have a degree of agility to either convert or to minimize principal and maybe a degree of interest, right, return, so those investments would remain sound? We know it quantitatively. When you go into qualitative, is there agility within my policy constructs, within my procedural constructs? And look, and agility can be driven by culture. These are the behavioral implications, right? Are you operating in a traditional environment? This is what we do. This is how we do it. Or we're going to be open-minded to the changes. That's when you get into the life cycle of risk management buoyancy, the phases that your operations are in, and the stage in which your business institution is in along its cycle. How old is your operation? Do you have, when you think about your people, processes, systems, have they been reviewed regularly? Do you have a complement of governance decision makers who remain cutting edge, that are always keeping abreast, that remain competitive, that understand their landscape, they understand their people, and which allows them to impact time to market and scale to market? Time to market being anytime there needs to be a change, because I have such a robust risk management process or a robust risk management system flow, right? That is agile, that remains dynamic and highly diversified. Any adjustment that I need to make in my product or service offering or delivery, I'm able to do it within the shortest period of time. So that's my time to market. I'm able to adjust from brick and mortar to fintech. I'm able to look at, do I have the proper skill sets within my people, within my human infrastructure? At the time, I'm going to run a parallel training and development program while managing outsourcing, right? Do I have the necessary structures in place to mitigate that risk? Do I have the risk transfers? Do I have the insurances, the collateral, the securitization, right? And with the evolution of technology, the evolution of every discipline, what is needed more now? It's analytics, it's business intelligence, it's critical thinking, it's soundness of judgment. So when you look at this investment quadrant, don't think about it as a standard level one. This is my financial risk factor. Think about it as enterprise-wide risk management view. How does it all come together? Which will ultimately impact scale. What is your reach? Your volume, right, will help to drive velocity. The quantity of sales, the quantity of impact at the customer level that is then going to ultimately transfer wealth, right? So let me stop right there for a moment. Do we have any questions so far? Did we get disconnected?
No, we're still here.
No
Will,
questions, listening.
Okay.
will you be sending us the slides, Mr. Williams? I don't think we have them.
Did you receive? Miguel should have sent the
Yeah, we
slides.
have it in a link in the, it's in the link in the email. The
Okay.
first email he sent us for the year.
Okay, let me go check. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? So you got, so we have the quadrant right in front. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so that was a lot. That was a lot. Let's take a deep breath. That was a lot. What did you gather? I don't want us to continue to progress with the slides or the concept of the discipline without us making sure we grasp some core fundamentals here. So help me to understand what was at least appreciated thus far from your view. Okay, we'll start with Teresa.
To be honest with you, sir, I feel like I feel like I'm starting the course over and this is like my second class and the other classes didn't happen. And so what I appreciate is I guess tying back the concepts to to real world scenarios and thinking things through as you would if you were a risk manager, and the preparation of getting into that frame of mind is what I'm appreciating.
Okay, that's good. And that's a good place to start, right? Good, because it's the risk management discipline is a critical responsibility. Remember, I started off saying you're measuring uncertainty. So you're in a gray space, and most of your colleagues, what do they want? They want a spreadsheet. Can you give me a report? What is it backed by? Can you give me some benchmarking? You're not always going to have this data, right? So if everyone knew, or if everyone had an example, what would be our basis of change? Someone had to do what? They had to take the risk. And so the risk manager is not a place of comfort. It's a discipline of discomfort. But you will be effective as a risk manager the more you read, the more you expose yourself, the more you engage cross disciplines, cross subject matters, different things that's happening globally. The risk management discipline came alive in our response to COVID-19. Everyone was either a doctor or a risk manager, because now I need to assess the risk of potential impact of COVID-19 to myself as I think about my personal health, my circle of friends, family, co-workers, my comings and goings. I need to understand that I now need to assess some key elements of effectiveness daily in the change of my behavior, in how I maneuver. You see where I'm coming from? Right? So that's good, Teresa. So Lanika, any thoughts from you in terms of the fundamentals?
Yes, I have an appreciation for the fundamentals that were discussed, and also, I guess, from a risk manager's perspective, broadening your, I guess, outlook into how we as risk managers should, look at different scenarios outside of what is expected, or, what we plan for, in order to better manage an organization's risk.
Okay, so let's hear from Janelle.
Okay. Yeah, what I got from it is that it kind of makes me want to dig deeper. It kind of makes me want to, get off the surface level when it comes to risk, and applying the critical thinking and trying to investigate, basically, what more, not to say that there's, like, we're looking for bad things, but just to make sure that we're covered, or, when something is presented to you, you can make sure you cover all aspects, and even aspects people weren't even thinking about. So it kind of blew my mind a little bit today, that sometimes you just gotta think a little bit more, or read a little bit more, to get the full picture.
So I like where you're going with that. That's definitely the right mindset to have. But be very careful. I want to caution you.
Mhm.
It's not about getting all the information. It's about reasonableness of your criticism towards your expected outcomes, right?
Okay.
Reasonableness of criticism. Um, what we all know about informed decision making is that it should be smart, right? Specific, measurable. It should be achievable, realistic, and time bound. So when we think about it, we need to make a reasonableness assessment with the information that we have available to us, and taking a bit further for the risk manager what we don't have available to us, because sometimes you have to make a decision within an hour, within half an hour, within seconds. You could be with colleagues or a management team that had information for weeks, for months, and you now get it at 9 o'clock because we got to make a decision at 3, right?
Right.
And it's important that you, as a risk management professional, you have to immerse yourself, like totally. If we are talking to risk management professionals right now, and you are in any company, whatever it is, and we pull them right now, and we ask, let's just say it's an investment firm, and everyone loves to call the CIO and the CEO, right? Let's have a dialogue with the C-suite, right? Because I can tell you that that's the track of the risk manager, right? The core fundamental of the C-suite is having a risk management posture, being a critical thinker on the uncertainty, on what is not necessarily in front of you. And how do you do that? It's by your network. It's by what you engage yourself in, which by your reading, right? Remember I talked about doing a lot of the reading, 5-10 minutes daily of just knowing what's happening out there, right? And if you want to specialize in some area of product or service or country and whatever that may be, right? It's really about, you call that CIO and you say, well, right now we have a brick and mortar operation. We're thinking about fintech, and we're looking at cryptocurrency. Like, what are your thoughts? And the CIO would tell you, these are speculative products so far. It looks as though the discussion that's arising, it's about, storehold of wealth. The popular ones are Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and it may not necessarily be within the appetite. Perhaps we can look at some benchmark factors that would perhaps maybe align with some of the more, I don't know, maybe more the the level of our balance sheet that is disposable, that we're willing to expense, because if we know we want to go into highly speculative investments, there's a high degree of uncertainty, right? We may also want to think about what is our customers' appetite, what is their degree of tolerance for highly speculative stocks. Yes, everybody's great when there's a level of return, but where people don't understand, or where customers or investors don't understand, that's where reputational risk happens, that's where op risk happens, that's where our value can be materially impacted, which can impact our an entire earnings per share. But I like the direction of what I see going on in certain industries, and we may want to, you see where I'm going?
Yes, sir.
And it's just like that, right? It is literally just like that. So the critical thinking, the ability to be an effective speaker, right? We're in sessions right now. What is your level of engagement? Do you use words of confidence? Do you use words that focus on what is critical for your delivery? Not that you have to, at this time, we're in sessions, you don't necessarily have to try to be so perfect, because, I really don't want you to, to be thinking on that level just yet, but just be mindful of it, right? But this is the idea. Most persons, they get certifications, they have it, and great, and then they have about 10 certifications behind their name, and they cannot burst a grape. And I just wonder sometimes, I say, boy, this person is a life student. The journey within the discipline, it's really within this quadrant, right? So Sorella, what are your thoughts?
Hi, sorry. Could you repeat the question, please?
So we were talking about the fundamentals of risk management. We were looking at the quadrant, and we were going through everyone's sort of feedback to demonstrate your level of appreciation for some of the fundamentals what are expected of you as a risk manager, right?
Yeah. Honestly, with the first few sessions that we have and trying to apply it to my daily work life, honestly, I was able to tweak our existing risk policy just to fine tune it, because I didn't know that there should not be a conflict when it comes to risk management. For example, right now, our CEO is considered the risk manager. So right. I didn't realize that that was an issue. But I mean, being a small company, what would be the next option? So right. It also allows you to look at not just the policies, but even the products and the way that you take on business. So I do have an appreciation for the course, and I can apply it to our, to our day-to-day operations.
Right. So in your case, there was, there's a potential segregation of duties, risk. There is some core conflicts of interest that need to be able to be evidenced when we talk about the market conduct, right, or operation conduct. So it can be challenging when you think about the nature, size, and complexity of your operation. And so that's why risk management is not a one size fit all.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's good to know that you're making some changes within your platforms, within your frameworks, and your operations, your product and services, and it's very likely these type of institutions, it really should, when you think about. Sorry?
Sorry, no, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. So when you have these type of, the size of these type of organizations, you often want to start off with a risk assessment, and it doesn't have to be a complex one. It doesn't have to be very technical. You can really just drive, okay, here are some key risks that I believe that can help us to be a success. Here are some KPIs, right? And then you can present those, and that could be done in parallel with discussions with your CEO, who is also hold the hat of risk manager, or you can do it with a consultant that can advise the board and the management team and the operations to really sort of, I would say, to be a bit more competitive, because sometimes disciplines like any non-income generating discipline or job function is not taken to a degree of seriousness until something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And that's what it is, right? And so your value add, you are the specialist, and you will only make the impact based on how much you're able to bring to the table, right? There is nothing new under the sun. So if we have a product and service delivery today, someone else is doing it. Who is in our competitive landscape offering this product? How are they structured? Are they, what is their degree of soundness? What has been their architecture? And when I think about the size of our balance sheet and our degree to invest in design, and when I say design, again, people, process, systems, what does that mean for us to become more competitive, more profitable, right? So there's some things to think about there, but it's good that you're able to really make the impact in the operations. That's a good step forward, right? Anyone else care to share before we continue? Okay. So continuing on. So let's go into operational risk. There's been a lot of talk there, right? Let's take a stab at this. Let's say, Teresa, give me your general overview of this particular aspect of the quadrant, taking into account some of the bullet points here, right? What are some of your general thoughts when you think about this quadrant?
Okay, when I think, can you hear me? It's just before.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So when I think of operational risk, right, I think managing people, processes, and technology to avoid loss or disruption to your company operation. And then I also think of some element of BCP. In the event that things go wrong, which they can, and also for planning for the unexpected, like a pandemic or a hurricane and those unfortunate events. That's what I think.
That is spot on. That is spot on. So all of those factors really embody your true ops risk, right? We know that by definition, it is those external factors, internal and external factors that can impact ops risk. There's often a lot of concentration on the internal element, right? When we go external, we talked about several examples a little earlier. We talked about political, we talked about legislative changes, we talked about really consumer sentiment, and there's even supply chain. So there's so many things that goes into op risk, right? When we take into account what we see today, what are some examples of critical op risk adjustment factors or adjustments made by institutions to remain buoyant? Ebony? Janelle? Operational risk adjustment.
Well, I know a few years back, there was a adjustment when it came to the compliancy aspect of opening accounts. I remember that they made some adjustments, whereas the requirements needed to open an account were, I guess, lessened. I guess I'm not too sure if it was a good idea, but
No,
that's my
you're right.
example.
So let's take that, let's break that apart, right? So the first point is correct. That's a good example. So the regulatory guidelines were relaxed to support financial inclusion and to encourage more bankable, right?
Right.
More bankable engagement of its people and citizenry. Now, that's a good adjustment because we had a proportionate growth of a secondary market that, to some extent, because of the absence of data, gave a level of elevated concern that sort of catalyzed our de-risking. So we have the CBDC, we have relaxed guidelines, we have more accounts now ever than before compared year over year, despite the pandemic. We now are phasing into more financial literacy, greater depth of inclusion, and the integration of really more, less high risk intensive service delivery across our financial institutions. So when we factor that in, we can appreciate to some degree of the operational risk adjustment factor. I'd like to talk briefly of why you think it may not have been a good idea, or how it could have resulted in some ultra-virus market outcome.
Right. See, the thing is, do remember I work in the collections department. So some of the things that were a requirement are no longer in place. So sometimes we can't find these people and they just be telling us wherever they want to, because now they don't have to present proof of where they live. So they don't issue out bills, or they wouldn't bring proof, for that. So it's hard for us to now locate some of these people who don't want to pay their bills. That's just from collections.
So hold on, let's take a few steps back here, because we have the relevant persons on the line, right?
Right.
So let's talk about it. Now, the guidelines have been relaxed. However, the guidelines stipulate that the onus is on the institution to determine its best approach, not that verification was not required. One of the reasons why the proof of address was no longer required was because some persons live in residences where their names were not on those utility bills. So how could you verify?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's take it further. We're risk managers. How do we risk adjust our process, right?
Right.
The guidelines go into discussion regarding a suitable referee, meaning someone who can verify or validate where the person resides. And it lists a whole lot of Class A, Class B, Class C eligible individuals and institutions. So that's one approach. The other approach is the fintechs. When you think about, your PayPal, Payoneer, these international organizations, they use the sort of digital longitude, latitude reference by way of Google, your Google location. So if someone says that they reside, let's say, Cable Beach. And you can, what they do as a verification process, I will take your number, and once you get home, you can give me a call. I will give you a callback procedure, turn on your location settings, and then I can verify your location. Now that's to some extent that has its degree of complexities, but you're able to verify the location settings. There's also a video call. Show me your street, show me your house, show me your car, take photos, this type of thing, right? There's different ways that we can adjust. Appreciate that the guidelines is really just a guide. And I don't want to speak for central bank, but I'm a risk professional. So when I think about credit, I think about my risk of default, the fact that in order to support or to securitize servicing of my credit facility, I definitely want to know how to find the person. I would want to get the references, any kinds of friends and relatives, anyone that is in association with the individual. Now, the NID is core. That operates like our social identification, right? And this is where bilateral arrangements between entities can give support. The various contractual arrangements where, yes, that's an account opening process. Let's take it further. That's an account opening process. That is not a process, that is not a step you should skip when you think about credit risk recovery. So something like that, I would encourage you to talk with your management team because when we really think about recoveries, when we think about credit risk and customer behavior, you have engagements even at the credit bureau level that should be able to give some degree of support. So the bad actors, I understand, but I think if we modify the posture and approach a bit, you'll be able to get some solutions. But check that guidance again. So continuing on, Teresa, did you have any observations? You wanted to continue there?
I just wanted to add, not necessarily to do with the relaxation of the guidelines, but I think perhaps one of the most significant pivot we've seen in response to operational risk has been digitization. We see it with, for example, our local companies like CVS launching their website, making it possible for you to pay online and then pick up. And then we see digitization within the government, the launch of the My Gateway, to make it so that it's convenient, but also to manage their operational risk in the event that persons can't make it to work, we have to stay home, you don't have a computer and so forth, that you're still able to function and get the business back up when you have these key risk events.
Absolutely. You're spot on. You're spot on. That's what operational resilience is about. It's about the emergence of the risk manager in times of disruption and uncertainty. No one has the answers for COVID-19, as we know, and even in the normal course of business, decision makers are challenged, right? And so what you'll find is it's about the effectiveness and the timeliness of decision making with the best available information, subject to reasonable criticism. Do your best and make the adjustments, right? So continuing on, legal compliance risk. Now, this is I think this is core to the Bahamas. I think everyone is a compliance officer today. So it's safe to say that every one of us should be able to really touch on this quadrant. But let's drive home the risk management posture, right? So let's talk about it. Back to you, Ebony.
Hi, sorry. So in regards to the legal and compliance risk part of it, we must ensure that banks and the other institutions are basically adhering to the regulatory and legal guidelines that are in place,
Right?
ensuring that they are not going outside of the policies and procedures.
Okay.
As being a part of the regulators, as you would know, we go into the institutions to just ensure that they are carrying out their duties and responsibilities as they would have them in their policies and procedures.
Right. Absolutely. Compliance, regulatory compliance, soundness of operations, effectiveness of core corporate governance, robust risk management, and the execution of its strategies while remaining in conformance with legislative and statute. 100% spot on. Any other points, Chanel?
Let's see. When it comes to legal and compliance risk, I agree with Ebony.
Okay.
It was just making sure that the company is doing everything up to standard, where they are not at risk of being sued or, like deflated in any type of way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that they're protected in as a whole.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, lawsuits. That was one of the first examples that we gave. We talked about the situation with Old Navy, the pricing risk. So litigation, definitely ops risk. So, you're spot on with that. Nika, what is your view when we think about the risk management postures, taking into account what has been shared thus far in terms of this quadrant? Hi, I think you may have. You want to turn up the volume? Is your mic on, Anika? Okay.
She looks like she having technical difficulties because it's coming on, then it goes off, then it comes on, then it goes off.
Yeah. Okay. Shirella, what are your thoughts? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're back at you, Teresa.
Okay, what am I speaking on, sir?
This is the final quadrant.
The business risk.
Yep. from a risk management posture.
Okay. So business risk appears to be corporate governance. I would say corporate governance and goals and objective setting. Key person, I see you. Sir, let me gather my thoughts and come back.
I'm so sorry.
You're on the right track. Go ahead, Sharella.
I just felt like I was just spitting things out. So
No, that's fine. You were on the right track. I like how it was developing.
okay, so for the business risk, I would say it's corporate governance, the management of culture. It says capital stability. That if you're a financial institution, I guess that would have something to do with the ICAP. In my estimation, business risk is ensuring what I would call the lifeline of your business, ensuring that you have financial or capital stability, appropriate culture, good corporate governance and direction, and that whoever you have in charge is fit and proper, and that you manage your reputational risks to avoid legal and other exposures.
Absolutely. That was spot on for business risk, and that's exactly the context you want to really be thinking about, right? You want to think about fitness and probity. Fitness and probity. That is key. Do you truly, you are a risk professional, you are an IT professional, you're an auditor, you are a business executive, but are you fit and do you have proprietary alignment for this organization? Do you understand the culture? Do you understand the complexity of products and services? Do you understand the strategy that the operations is looking to move towards now and in the future? Are you able to motivate and effectively lead the people, either by your example or certainly by your technical capacity to support training and development? What is your network base? How are we going to effectively leverage relationships? We talk about contractual contexts here, right? Contracts are the key. You have formal contracts, but the greatest level comes from those informal arrangements. The networking, the support that comes with your relationships across different disciplines, persons that you would have that align with not only just your discipline, but that align with your passion, that will help you firstly as an individual to grow, and then support you within your organizational growth across teams. So the cross-sectional discipline is what really is fundamental to that business risk. When we go into the legal and compliance, so that was very helpful from a business risk context. When we go into the legal and compliance risk, what is fundamental here is the soundness of the constructs. Soundness of constructs. So your instruments, contracts, individuals, customers, the soundness of my customer relationships. We talked earlier about some of the concerns that could arise with a lack of customer integrity from a credit relationship standpoint. What is the soundness of that? What are my intervention stages to exit that relationship? Sometimes there can be a lot of reputational risk factors because everyone now just loves to jump in social media and just express their opinion, right? And that can impact overall investor, consumer confidence, valuation, reputational risk, all these kinds of things. But it's the constructs, right? When you go a little further into it, it also looks at your concentration. Is my investment portfolio heavily dominated in fixed income securities? Is it suitably diversified across different countries? Is my customer segmentation really just with a younger, more vibrant group of customers? Or is it with an aging set of customers alongside their life cycle? So there must be a fitness and property of products and services. And it should align with their risk posture. Do I want to go into certain types of delivery of constructs? We're in COVID-19. We talked about the digital platforms where businesses have made the operational adjustment. And so when I embrace some of the relationship dynamics, do I want customers signing arrangements in the digital space? What are my information security concerns? How is data stored? How are my data assets classified? How are my validation? Am I going to consider the assurance or risk transfer by customer consent? When we have these various applications that we download from Google Store, and the applications are requesting rights, we're just clicking away.
Mr. Williams, how do we compete? How do we compete with our outdated legislation that do not fit fintech companies? We're still getting questions like, this, online application, but there's no signature. I mean, really, like we're still being asked these questions. Modern companies, where's the signature?
Well, you'll find that the legislative constructs have already aligned themselves with electronic adaptation. The challenge that we have in our culture is that we love to be spoon-fed.
Mm-hmm.
The legislation already says electronic documents are allowed. I do not need my legislation to tell me get an electronic signature or how to do it.
But
Okay. Here is the thing. If you know electronic signatures are allowed, right? And it's already within legislation and it's already communicated within the regulatory constructs. We now need to design what is cost effective and palatable for the customer validation of their acknowledgement and acceptance of the arrangements. Now, signature, again, we have to transition our mindset. We are thinking signature as in pen to paper. Digital signature can be by way of a PIN code.
Yep.
You see where I'm going from?
No, I feel you. But yeah.
So the investment, so firstly, there's the operation adjustment is about the risk management, the IT department, the executive team, they understanding one, we have to make the investment. It's not always just technology, right? It's about our systematic approach to alignment. And these are some costs that we have to amortize. We're going to get the benefits later. Like, okay, let's talk about it. If COVID-19 didn't happen, I mean, would we have made the advancement we did that we've done in terms of our customer engagement and technology? Probably not. It's culture, right? It is all culture. And that's why we have these disciplines, like risk management. Notice I talked about business intelligence. I talked about analytics. A lot of what we do, much of the core disciplines that will remain buoyant and relevant in the future are those that align with professional judgment. If you're thinking 10, 20, 30 years into the future, you have the emergence right now of artificial intelligence. You have the emergence right now of the digital interfaces, right? You have the chatbots. You have all of the emerging technologies that everything is about reducing time, improving efficiency, increasing volume. Everything is about time to market, scale to market. So I talked about that, right? And so it's about really understanding what is my appetite to change. If we know principally that the regulator as well as judicial bodies are often lagging when compared to expected market outcomes, and this is a global reality, then we're in a bit of a pickle if our mindset today is, where is the regulatory guidance? Because oftentimes the regulator, the legislative bodies, they're now coming together and saying, market, we don't know what to do.
Right, exactly. They do.
And,
they
and,
do.
and what they are saying, and they're doing it by way of the consultative papers.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, help us to understand how to regulate you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what it is, right? So not to say that you reference a bad idea or a bad delivery of your contacts, but it's more of, let's take the same thought and let's make some slight adjustments to the perspective. So I like that you shared that. And I think that's a helpful view to have, right? So very good point. Would anybody else like to share in the context of the legal and compliance risk quadrant? Okay. I see that everybody was very excited to come to sessions today. And I completely understand. What I will continue to encourage you to do is absolutely just, keep on reading. It's not something that you're really going to get overnight. It's something that you just have to do it. Like, there's no meticulous or comprehensive planning that you need to do. I'll be sending you, I made some attempts to send an email last week. I was moderately challenged because of some of my time dynamics, but I'll definitely try to do so between tomorrow and Friday in preparation for our next class, which is our final class for module 3. Now, before we go, I just want to walk through a little bit of some of the slides so you will appreciate where we are, right? Hold on, let's see here. So of course, I don't know why I have this red mark on the screen. Okay, so of course we have we talked about the quadrant, and we went into a degree of depth from the risk management posture. So definitely you want to keep this slide in mind. Go to it as your core reference point as you go through the slides. We went into really investment risk. What is risk management? It's about probability and likelihood of uncertainty. These are the uncertainty events. When you think about the return, whether the return is your product or service, where the return has to do, what is your investment? Is your investment in your customer? Is your investment in your people? Is your investment in your processes? Then by definition, right, of fundamentals, it goes into different typologies of risk. But the unsystemic risk, right? The unsystemic risk. This goes into where you really have very little control. You may have some concentration factors, and there may be some elements that would support greater buoyancy within your portfolio, within the management of your operations, within the dynamics of your team. And it's all about diversifying. We think about diversifying is, let me spread the risk across different typologies of investment. Let's think about risk management. Let me spread the risk of delivery by adding different skill sets across teams. Let me ensure that my core business platform is not concentrated to one software. Do I have cloud backup service? Do I have risk transfer elements? How do I want to properly mitigate any potential risk factor, both in the bad or the adverse? And then how do I prepare myself for the growth opportunities for what can work within that circumference or typology of risk, right? And then there's some other risk factors that we talked about. Some of these are very standard that we can all go through. We talked about a lot of this. One of the things I want to point out is the reinvestment risk, right? The cyclicality. We did an overview of velocity and volume. When it comes to time to market, scale to market, and this is when we looked at Apple, Samsung, these type of homogeneous business operations, you streamline to what works and you have velocity. Your time to market moves faster. You understand your economies of scale, the size of your operations from a nature, complexity, what works, and it may be again within your jurisdiction, across jurisdiction. What are some of those barriers of entry? What is the scale of my competition? This type of thing. This is what you want to think about, right? So the text goes into investment rates and this kind of thing. When obviously if you have an investment that works, you want to reinvest that, and there's the risk that you may not necessarily get the return. The risk management posture is really about understanding your business. Anyone that would have done any type of audits or assurance services, you got to start with, okay, let me understand this. Let me start by knowing what are the policies, what are the procedural process flows. And if it's 10 steps, can I reduce it to 5? Can I reduce it to 3? Do I need to invest in more technology? Do I need to look at outsourcing? Do I need to look at better leveraging across teams, right? Communication. So communication is a factor. We looked at corporate governance. We talked about where does risk management fall? Risk management runs parallel with the first line of defense. We talked about first line of defense as the risk owners, and these are the persons who have the delegated responsibility from the board of directors. The text clearly outlines the adherence to frameworks and the balance of risk to reward dynamics. We all know really about internal audit, and that's clear, right? That's been there for decades. Risk management is, listen, you're going to audit this at the end of the year? Great. Let me see it today. I'm with you today. We need to address our concerns today. If I have a concern in January, I can't wait until December to address it. We have to find a way to address this today and adjust ourselves accordingly, right? So the ongoing monitor and notice timeliness, key activities, outcomes, controls, effectiveness of controls, remediation, managing the risk in alignment with appetite, with strategy, ultimately to get the outcomes, profitability, buoyancy, sustainability. And again, it breaks down, the next slide breaks down a lot of what we talked about, right? A matured environment has internal control measures within its policy and procedures. So you'll see this more with the more softer type of operations where they have the IT general controls. We went into a little bit about the segregation of duties, right? You're wearing multiple hats. You have a more leaner operation. We got our regulator at the rails, right? We have our external auditor at the rails. They're at the fourth and third line of defense, right? And guess what? Our customer engagement is between first and second. Look at second line of defense, guys. Look at second line of defense. Do you appreciate the responsibility? Financial control, security, risk management, quality, inspection, compliance, and it goes into more, right? So your reading, your exposure, your network, all of this is going to help because you're going to have to support design. What do I mean by design? Implementation of systems, user acceptance before systems are implemented, these policy design, procedural design, policy adjustments, right? Reviewers, people risk factors. All of these things come into material context when you truly appreciate how the risk management discipline is integrated. I talked about some of the life cycles of the investor. And the core phases really is the accumulation, consolidation, and the text goes on to really give you an appreciation of what each of the phases really go into. But it's about the life cycle, and the life cycle and the wealth cycle principally is on age. Remember, we talked about customer segmentation. Do we understand risk reward dynamics in the context of appetite of the customer when we look at age, when we look at where they are within their cycle, right? So again, younger age, accumulate, you want to accumulate wealth, right? Middle age, you want to consolidate. Most of you are in the younger age. I'm more in the middle age towards, hopefully in the spending phase. That's where I really want to get, because this is where we have the true optimization of our net worth, right? Like literally right here, right here. This is what it is. We consolidate, we have our investments, we address our systemic risk, we got the diversified portfolio, we plan for our future, we understand future value, how it reverse engineers into the present value considerations for us to be able to what? Get into the spending phase where we have our estate planning, we have our risk transfers, we have our insurances, we have our beneficiaries, we have these things in the context. And this is what the investor thinks about. And that's why when prices change, when there's volatility, when there's no buoyancy, when there's no soundness of governance, these things matter because they affect the phases. Because what I can't get back, what can't I get back? I can't get my time back. I cannot get my time back, the truest asset, right? Investment experience. So you want to go through this. Look at this, the risk reward dynamics, security, safety, income, growth, speculation, and it goes into different products and services, naturally that we are familiar with. Now, with the evolution of the risk reward dynamic, we know fintech is here. It is bursting through social media, the boardroom, everywhere you can think about. Everything right now are CBDC, right? We've gotten relaxed from the CFATF, from the FATF. We are now at the forefront of what is at the cutting edge of financial evolution. And what are we doing? We are still apparent to be sort of fighting this traditional approaches, partially maybe due to culture, partially maybe due to really just leadership style. It could be so many reasons, but it's about how we shift the dynamics. So the slide continues with different portfolio management approaches. When you're coming up with your policy structure, but the call for me is when we get here, investment risk tolerance. We talked about these things, right? So we went into examples of aggressive, moderate, and conservative, risk averse, risk seeking, risk neutral, risk acceptant, risk level, and self-explanatory, right? Put into proper context, it matters. It matters when you design policy. It matters when you look at a review process. Do we want to remove the senior manager from a review process? Do we want to move a vice president from the review process? Do we need to have internal audit involved? What is my tolerance? What is my appetite? And my risk acceptance? When I think about the first, second, and third line of defense, where does it all align? When I think about investments, that's straightforward. We understand that. Great. Let's go into corporate governance, fitness and property, soundness of judgment, regulatory posture, alignment of products and services, scale to market, time to market, remaining on the competitive edge. This is what this is all about. And this is what's going to help the dynamics of your product and service delivery, right? Of course, this particular slide really just starts to drive home the point. That's healthy reading, right? And this is what it's all about. It's about the trade-off, right? What is the reasonableness of the trade-off? And the trade-off is higher risk, higher return. Is that necessarily true? The higher risk, higher return dynamic is a factor of time, and a measure of time in the context of proportionate to expected returns. These go into behavior, tolerance, behavior. We had the credit risk example. We had the price change example. We love to talk about assessments, but there are psychological and economic factors, right, that go into these things. And there's some healthy reading about measures of confidence, optimism, the fear of loss, and again, this is what would impact really perhaps resistance to change, misinterpretation of regulatory requirements, like the documentation, right? We see a lot of this, cognitive bias. We see a lot of herd behavior. Everyone is getting free advice. Everyone is following what they feel within their gut, right? And so these sort of economic and psychological factors, they have to take into account. So What does this mean? Today, we talk about it as what? We pivot toward emotional intelligence, right? I'll stop right now to ask if there's any questions so far from anyone, because I know that's been a lot. Any questions so far? Are we still connected?
Yes, we're connected, sir. No question.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So, continuing on. Sorry for this red mark. I don't know what that is. All right. So we talked about the economic factors. We went into that. And guess what? What is economic? Financial and market performance. It's performance. But today, it's more than just performance. It's elasticity. Elasticity of demand and supply. It's supply value chain. It's about the value add processes, emotional intelligence across disciplines. These are the factors that drive true value, both in the present value and in the future value, right? And of course, when we think about uncertainty, I mean, you're going to have that, right? Okay. So we're going to have that, right? So let's continue. Something's happening with the slide here. Here we go. Right. So we talked a little bit about this. This is healthy reading. And this goes into, you remember our discussion, you may recall our discussion on Basel I, or the pillar 1 with capital, right? The core context there is wealth preservation, working capital and reserve capital, and understanding value at risk across measuring your operational, credit, and market risk factors, right? Now, some of those pillars or domains may not be relevant for your institution, but you have to design what is the capital composition, right? Because you want to minimize risk of loss. You want to meet your future needs. You want to allow for total return, right? And of course, I talked about time horizon. So that is critical. When you go into decision-making, portfolio analysis, it always talks about these constraints, right? And notice it's about time. And time aligns with that life cycle that we talked about, life cycle and wealth cycle of your customer segmentation, of your investor segmentation, right? When, I'll give you an example, when Rubbermaid looked at designing a lot of its Tupperware, it literally got a group of stay-at-home moms together, and they said, what would be best for us to help you to manage your household? And they came up with their designs. The design did not stay the same. So year over year, they made incremental improvements from the context of cost, improvement in the context of overall performance and efficiency, and then certainly value. Then you have the environmentalists, oh, the plastic, oh, the this, oh, the that, oh, the next, let's go organic, let's do this, let's do compostable. And this is where we are, right? So it's the balancing act, right? We went into the legal and regulatory factors. So those are about demonstrating prudence, right? And there will always be unique needs and preferences that you have to take into consideration. We talked a lot about these, so this is healthy reading. The classification of assets is what you really need to stand out. What matters to your institution? What matters? What is an asset? What truly is an asset? Yes, we know current assets, fixed assets. Yes, that's on the balance sheet. But from a risk management context, what are your assets? Your constructs, your agreements, the value of your people, ongoing training and development. And those are the intangibles that we don't often think about, right? Your assets can, in fact, from a risk management context, be on your ops, when categorized within your ops risk. And your ops risk would be naturally an operational expense, right? So of course, the text goes into asset allocation. And then it measures the, the uncertainty of risk and classifications of what is more liquid. And when we go back to the quadrant, we want to focus on the ROI across our asset classifications when we think about the nature, size, and complexity of our operation. And here we go. We have, again, a sort of streamlined focus on portfolio, because of course it's investment and liquidity risk. But how do we get here? We get here from the quadrant. How do you select your investment? You got to go through your quadrant: identification, assessment, measurement, controls, effectiveness measures, remediation if necessary. Look at your customer segmentation. Do we understand their needs when we look at the life cycle, when we look at the wealth cycle, the aging? Do we understand the behavior of the portfolio? Do we understand the nature of our customers and services? I offer credit, that's my product. What is my matching principle? What is my application of IFRS 9? What is my treatment to the customers from a dollar value add perspective, right? What are some of the procedures? And then ultimately, what is my purpose? What is my strategy? Does it remain dynamic, right? So selection, construction, evaluation, and you can see it continues to go on. Your needs, your tolerances, and this is within capital markets. For those that are familiar with capital markets, we work in the capital markets predominantly, but there are other disciplines. And so you want to focus on those objectives, those constraints, because the constraints help you to understand the risks of uncertainty, right? Formulation. Formulate your critical thinking. Yes, the text goes into policy structure, but it's formulation of design, the architecture, the measurement. What all goes into your overall effectiveness, right? Which then allows you to appreciate truly your risk reward dynamics. So I will stop here for now. And the next time we meet, one second. What's happening? There we go. Yes. I will stop here for now. So just to get any questions, the next segment will go into some of the theories of quantitative and qualitative constructs when we think about investment and liquidity risk, right? Any questions so far? Are we still connected?
Yes. I think someone is asking if you would send over the presentation, please.
I don't think she got it, she said.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay, Miguel should have sent it. I think it was already mentioned that someone was going to send it, right? So you guys have everyone's emails, right? So,
yes.
okay. Send it on.
Okay.
Sir, did you get a chance to query the case study?
I haven't seen it. No.
Oh,
Because what this liquidity and investment risk and all of that, that was actually one of the questions. So
Okay.
yeah, but obviously we didn't cover it prior to this case study.
Also, the exams, did you get any more information on that? When it's gonna be on, how's it structured?
Miguel had indicated to me that there was going to be some meetings either next week or the week after because of the adjustment in the schedule. You really just had module 3. I wouldn't worry about the exams right now. You have 3 more modules to go through all the way through 6. There will be some certainly adjustments in your response to the case study, which I definitely understand. Let's give some latitude to those discussions, and once Miguel gets back, then I could see us taking a little further relative to the case study.
okay, thank you, sir. No problem.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So once again, I will send you some slides. Sorry, I will send you an email that will give you some context into the standards of enterprise risk management, COSO, some of the ISO standards. And I will say this, yes, there's the exam, yes, there's the case study. Once you follow some of the examples and the engagement and overview that I provide you in terms of the fundamentals, and if we have an opportunity to have that review session, you will be fine. In fact, you'll be beyond more than fine. And you gotta follow it all the way through.
Who needed the link? Let me see if I can forward it to you.
This is for the case study.
For the slide.
Oh, I think it was Teresa.
Teresa. Okay, I'll forward it to you, Teresa, if you hear me.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No problem.
Yeah, and then just check among your colleagues who may need it, right? Because this is your journey together. Anything that is, because I went over the slides, we talked about them earlier. We did a walkthrough of module 1 and 2. We've really already covered module 3, but I'm settling as we go through the slides because I want to integrate concepts. So that as you see the words, they'll be relatable. You have the slides, yes, read them. That's an obvious first request. But read them thinking about what you read in the media today and what's happening in your organization. Remember, this is an executive's course. This is an executive level course. So it's thought learning. You'll find that your multiple choice questions for the exam are more scenario based for you to evidence application of the discipline and your knowledge of fundamentals, right? And so that's where you would want to focus. Okay, if I were to give you some sort of guidance in your approach, right? All right, so if there are no further questions, I would bid you all a wonderful evening. Take care, and please look out for my communications. And if you haven't heard from Miguel next week, please feel free to send me an email or reach out to him directly, so that those questions regarding the structure of the case study and exam are addressed. So a pleasant good evening to all, and I trust you will have a wonderful evening and weekend, and until we meet again, all the best.
Awesome, thank you.
Teresa, confirm if you got it, because I just sent it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, see your email.
All right. Awesome. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
Nope.